moderator for today's session. And before we start, I would like to share some essential information for the benefit of all participants here. We've made an effort to cater to our multilingual audience. So for those of you who prefer to listen the webinar in Spanish or French, we've got you covered. At the bottom of your screens, you will find a menu bar, and within that, you will see a circular icon. If you'd like to tune in with a Spanish or French interpretation, simply click on this icon and select your preferred language. If you are having any troubles, please do not hesitate to send a message on the chat. In addition, please also note that this session is being recorded, as you might have seen already, and this is done so we can continue to share the knowledge and insights of today with a broader audience, and for those who couldn't join us live. With that being said, let's get started and have a productive session together. So hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are. It is a real pleasure to welcome you all to this important discussion on breaking barriers, women's leadership in addressing chemicals and waste issues. I extend my heartfelt thanks to each one of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today. This webinar is a collaborative effort brought to you by the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, the Strategic Approach to International Chemicals Management, SAICM, and the International Pollutants Elimination Network, IPEN. You may know that last year, IPEN released a groundbreaking report named Women's Leaders Addressing Chemicals and Waste Issues, which was sponsored by a project funded by the Global Environment Facility through SAICM. This report presents the incredible narrative of women leaders from different walks of life who have rolled up their sleeves to ensure the sound management of chemicals and waste. We can't ignore the fact that women are disproportionately affected by chemical exposure due to their unique physiology, biological characteristics, and different kinds of occupational exposure. But just as they are affected, they can also affect change. Therefore, UNEP, SAICM, and IPEN have come together to organize today this platform for these brave women leaders. They will share with us their experiences, their wisdom, and their practical strategies that have helped them tackle chemicals and waste issues within their communities and organizations. Today, our goal is not just to inform, but also to ignite a spark in each of you, especially the women amongst us, to take action for a more sustainable future. We want to highlight the undeniable critical role of women in these challenges, and in doing so, inspire and empower women across the globe to rise, take action, and lead the way. As we embark on this enlightening journey, I encourage you to also engage with us. So please use the chat function freely. Ask your questions in the Q&A box as they come to mind. We will dedicate time at the end of the presentations to address them all. So without further ado, I think it's time to dive into our exciting session today. So once again, welcome. I would like now to request Mr. Joel Ticker to start the webinar with his opening remarks. Joel leads the Sustainable Chemistry Catalyst at the Lowell Center for Sustainable Production, where his group works on research, analysis, and strategy to make chemistry safer for people and the planet. His research focuses on the development of innovative scientific methods, policies, and practice to accelerate the design and application of safer products and manufacturing processes. He is an expert on environmental health, risk assessment, green chemistry, chemicals policy, and pollution prevention. Over to you, Joel, please.
Yes, good morning. Thank you so much, Eduardo. I'm thrilled to be here, honored to be here, and to provide some opening context for the work today. Just as Eduardo said, I'm trained as a health scientist, so I spent much of my early career studying the problems of chemicals on health. But I've also trained in green chemistry, so trying to find those solutions. And my research has spanned from understanding the impacts of phthalates on health to understanding the impacts of polybrominated diphenyl ethers, which we did a study looking at the accumulation of diphenyl ethers in women's breast milk. And I think that for me, the telling part of that story is the most natural thing we can do is breastfeed our children, that a woman can do is breastfeed her child, and yet breast milk is contaminated, and we need to be doing. There's something wrong in that picture, but understanding that unique vulnerability and the trying to even think about a balance between breastfeeding or not breastfeeding, it shouldn't ever be a question. I also served on the board of the Mass Breast Cancer Coalition, so one of the first breast cancer and environment organizations that worked closely with and formed the Silent Spring Institute to study the impacts of chemical exposures on breast cancer. 90% of breast cancer is not explained by genes. It has to be environmental and then social factors that are explaining it. And that is the case with many women's cancers. I'm going to start with a frame for my opening comments, which is the idea of sustainable chemistry. We worked with a green chemistry education organization called Beyond Benign to create a consensus definition of sustainable chemistry. And what's important, right, this is the goal. This is the vision we aim to aspire, is chemistry that is better for health and environment, that provides benefit to health and environment without causing harm to current or future generations. But important in that definition is this idea of equity and justice. We need to start with this point of avoiding those disproportionate impacts and not shifting risks when we make our chemical choices. So the question then is, how do we address those disproportionate impacts and unique vulnerabilities that women have? And the impacts of chemicals on women's health are well known. They are, we've known them for millennia. One example that I think is very good about how women have gotten involved in chemicals issues is the radium girls. So women who were putting radium on watch dials in the early 1900s, they were getting a rare form of jaw cancer because of the fact that they had to put the tip of the brush onto their tongues to get the fine point, to then put it in the radium and then paint the watch dial so it glowed in the dark. Those women then organized to take action. That action, their organizing, has been written up in a book and a movie. But if I think about who some of the greatest champions of occupational environmental health are, they're women. Dr. Alice Hamilton discovered the impacts of lead on health and fought vigorously to keep lead out of gasoline, lead out of paint. Dr. Harriet Hardy, another environmental health and occupational health leader in the early 1900s. So we've known, and women have been at the forefront of environmental health and protections from environmental health at the beginning. So Eduardo laid out why this matters, right? The health impacts on women are important, right? Certain cancers, breast and ovarian cancer, other reproductive health impacts, endometriosis associated, for example, with dioxin exposure, sterility, infertility, low birth weight, other reproductive health, autoimmune impacts. And then we have the unique vulnerabilities that Eduardo talked about, the physiological ones that are due to higher levels of exposure, accumulation in fat. Women have some of the highest levels of accumulated chemicals in their bodies. That unique times in development, for example, during pregnancy, release chemicals back into women's bodies. They're stored in bone. And then, importantly, women can pass those chemicals down to their offspring. And that's a painful outcome of exposure. Women's unique vulnerability depend on their types of work, which tend to be in the services, informal sector. Their household responsibilities, which require that they are exposed to more chemicals. And then obviously we have certain product types that are deliberately aimed at women, often with very toxic chemicals, for example, cleaning products and health and beauty products. Then we see sexism. There's sexism in the science. The way we do scientific assessments, for example, epidemiology, don't often account for the unique vulnerability of women. The fact that women leave the workforce, come back into the workforce, they work in the informal workforce. The way we think about risk assessment often assumes a 70-kilogram male and not the unique vulnerability during certain windows of development, whether those be early childhood, during puberty, or even during pregnancy. We have a medical community that doesn't address the unique risks that women have to chemical exposures. Often the medical community looks at a similar problem in men and a similar problem in women very differently. The tragic death of a world-class track star this week from preeclampsia, from pregnancy-related hypertension, in the US, just still tells us that women's healthcare is substandard compared to men's healthcare. And in fact, when we start thinking about reproductive health impacts, we see that the attention gets spent on men's outcomes, for example, lower sperm count or sterility in men, and not the women's health outcomes. We see that disparity in those sexism in the jobs women have, in the solutions they have available to them, and ultimately relates back to the limited power of women. And this is even worse for poor and marginalized women and women in the informal economy. But today we're hearing from women leaders who are motivating change. We know that women are more likely to take precautionary action. They worry about their families, they worry about their children, they're worried about the health of the world around them, and they're willing to advocate to protect their families. And I want to sort of give some examples here quickly of women leaders and women actions that drive safer chemicals. And this is important because they're not focused just on stopping bad, but really driving better. And 4 examples I'm going to quickly give is one, the California Healthy Nail Salon Collaborative. In the United States, about 97% of nail salon workers are of Vietnamese descent. They're often exposed to very significant chemical exposures to hazardous chemicals, often while pregnant. So through policy advocacy and labor, environmental, and health advocacy, new legislation has been put in place to protect those workers, and a collaborative called the California Healthy Nail Salon Collaborative, which is not only investigating unique health risks of nail salon workers, but really focusing on driving the change to get safer chemicals and health protections to the workers in this sector. Another one is work with cleaning workers. So the National Domestic Workers Alliance has worked with a set of organizations on a project to educate women on safer cleaning products, and to empower them to advocate for their use in workplaces. And then let's talk about a couple of companies that are really driving change towards safer chemistry. Beauty Counter, which is a leading front-runner company in the health and beauty space, founded by a woman, run up till recently by women, and recently acquired by Carlyle for an estimated value of, I think, $2 billion, really driving the healthy and clean beauty industry. And what they've done is motivated their sales force, which is nearly 100% women, to be advocates for policy change in cosmetics or chemicals policy that then benefits health, benefits women, and benefits the environment. And one other example I want to give is a company we've worked closely with, Mango Materials. It's a women-run company that is driving safer plastics based on taking methane from wastewater treatment plants and turning it into a biodegradable, bio-based, and safe plastic or polymeric material or plastic material that can be used, degradable, but also a woman-run company. We see many of these in the early in the safer chemical space, early stage companies trying to drive change towards safer chemicals and material. So as we get towards thinking about solutions, how do we drive this forward and have women at the forefront of sustainable chemistry? One is STEM education. We need to get women into the STEM and business workforce. We need them to be the scientists, the business leaders, and the community organizers of the future. We need to give women the power, the tools, and the organizing ability to drive change. We need women mentoring women into higher R&D and business positions. When women run companies, they tend to focus more on sustainability attributes. We need to change the science and the policy so that women's health and women's impacts have greater attention and protection. And then we need to engage large multinationals to put their money where their mouths are. When they're talking about gender inequity, we need them to put the money into the community engagements, the efforts that are really driving safer chemistry. One example is Apple has an impact fund that is putting money, about $700 million, into driving minority-owned businesses and then mentoring those businesses to be successful in driving safer, more sustainable products. And then obviously thinking about global preferential financing for women-owned businesses and collaborations that can drive the change that we'll need to move towards sustainable chemistry. So ultimately, by protecting women, particularly vulnerable women, we are protecting everyone. So let's now hear from these women leaders, their stories, and the lessons learned. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Thank you very much to you, Joel, for setting the tone and giving us such a stimulating start to our webinar today. Please, colleagues, join me now in welcoming Ms. Jacqueline Alvarez. Jacqueline is the Chief of UNEP's Chemicals and Health Branch and a seasoned professional with over 25 years of experience in environmental policy, chemicals, and waste management. Her extensive career stretches across national, regional, and international fields. She has held notable positions such as the director of the Basel and Stockholm Coordinating Center for Latin America and the Caribbean, BCRC, and served as UNEP Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean from 2021 to 2022. Her work involves strategic advisory, negotiations, and policy implementation on environmental issues with a special focus on chemicals and waste. Over to you, Jacqueline.
Hello, can you hear me correctly?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
Yes. So after Joel, it will be very hard to do some reflections. It was very comprehensive, the points that were raised, but I think I will like to start by sharing with you some reflections from my perspective as a woman. We have dreams, we have capacities, we have weaknesses, but most importantly, as it was also mentioned by Joel, we can drive change. I remember when I was little, and a regular phrase that I used to hear constantly is that women are weak. And I was always asking why, and the explanation is due to your physiology, due to your biological makeup. You are weaker. And my brother, he used to say, you can't run as fast as we can, as men can. Years after, I started to learn about chemicals and the good and the bad, because we also have medicines that are under the chemicals title. And one thing that captured my attention when I grow older was the Stockholm Convention, particularly because it recognizes women and children as vulnerable populations. And not long ago, I saw a little child over there. I don't know if he or she is listening what we are saying, but it's very interesting to see how women, we need to interact with our children all of the time. Further exploring, I happened to learn also about occupational exposure, in conjunction not only with our different biology, but also because of the vulnerability on health, in particular, because sometimes we are exposed without even knowing we are exposed. And the impact of chemicals presence in our body goes beyond our lives. It can go up to our grandchildren. If you look at, the eggs that we carry when we are having our children and the eggs they have inside. So I remember also very clearly one professor of mine saying at the university when he was explaining pesticides and exposure, he said, and guess who washes with bare hands the clothes of their husbands after spraying pesticides or after having worked during the whole day in the factory. So it happens that exposure is not something that only refers to occupational exposure, but also for those people living in the same household. Having used the word household, it also comes into mind personal care products, household products, still often in the market and always or usually tending to address women to buy them, to be attractive for women. And if I go a little further, and makeup and beauty stereotypes and how all of those cosmetics also can affect directly ourselves. And fortunately, in many countries in the world, we have been having legislation banning the presence of mercury in skin lightening creams, or the presence of lead in certain cosmetics as well. Unfortunately, these are issues that are not only crucial to women, but if they are, low-income communities are much more exposed to these situations and these obstacles. Earlier, also in the introduction, there was the just word appearing, and gender equality very, very strongly. We, all of us, not only women, we can really be agents of change. And we should not be treated as vulnerable groups standalone. Maybe we have to start thinking of populations at risks with certain vulnerabilities that are different depending on where we live, on our characteristics, and in a way, the different ways that we behave. We women, we are not just victims in this narrative, as children are not either, or men in certain circumstances, but for sure, we are the drivers of change. We can't create our avenues, and with the decisions we make, that makes a whole difference. If I want to zoom out and forget me as a human, as a woman, what are we doing at the United Nations Environment Programme level? We are committed to ensure that the voices of everybody are heard, in particular of those leaders in the world that have the XX chromosome with them. UNEP recognizes the critical role of women in environmental governance and has systematically over the years incorporated in its work gender aspects, gender responses, and now we can say that we consider that is part of our DNA to have this integral approach for the gender issues. You will hear later today an example, I think, of the Stockholm Convention in relation to how they have been doing the work, and also in the context of multilateral environmental agreements, the recognition of gender and adopting gender action plans when working to implement the conventions is very, very critical. You heard Eduardo talking about publishing reports. There are many, many reports, but what matters really is that we need to engage with both genders in decision-making processes, with all of the genders, in a way with the segregation of data, with strengthening institutional capacities for gender mainstreaming, allocating the resources that are needed. And that goes beyond parity or equality in numbers. Looking ahead, we have a huge opportunity in front of us. And as you have heard maybe a lot of times, we always describe that the world is facing three planetary crises: the climate one, the biodiversity loss one, and the chemicals and pollution. For the first two, we already have frameworks working on them. For the next one, we will have an updated of the existing framework for chemicals management that will be adopted this September in Bonn. What we are in a way going to embrace as the global community, not only countries, but all the stakeholders that are really addressing the topics and can be key in these issues. Chemicals management is crucial. You have heard the previous speaker, all of the aspects. He mentioned plastifiers. He mentioned the different implications that we have. The good news is that solutions exist. And that is where we have to think very strongly at this moment. Integrating gender is really important, but also addressing things from that perspective is really very, very key to succeed. Combining efforts and commitments by everyone is the way to go. And the opportunity of this Bonn conference in September this year provides that specific aspect of including in black and white gender-specific considerations for addressing chemicals and waste, but also addressing the pollution crisis that we are facing in. With this, I thank you very much for the opportunity to give this opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jacqueline, for your words regarding UNEP perspective on the interplay of gender and chemicals, for sharing your expertise and inspiring us with your perspective, but also for highlighting the role that women have on acting as catalysts for change. So now up next, I would like to introduce Ms. Susan Winfield from the BRS Secretariat, who will speak about integrating gender equality in chemicals and waste policies. Susan is a program management officer in the governance branch of the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, BRS. And prior to her role at the Secretariat, she performed a variety of project management and consultancies roles within the UN, World Bank, UK government, and banking, finance, and IT sectors. Susan holds a bachelor's degree in economics and a master's degree in environmental technology. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I take it you can hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Brilliant. Okay, I will share my screen just to say hello to everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm very honored to join this webinar today, and thank the organizers very much for including the BRS Secretariat. I will just take a moment to share the screen and just verify that I have been successful. Are you able to view my presentation?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you very much. Well, I've been invited today to reflect on BRS perspectives with regard to gender and chemicals and waste management. In particular, women's leadership. And I think that we have at several points over the past 12 to 13 years working on the gender issue, we have taken specific steps to really recognize the important role that women do play in addressing chemicals and waste issues, and of course the important role gender plays as well. This is quite a time for the gender agenda. Apologies for the rhyming there, inadvertent. There seems to be a lot going on within this space, which is very exciting. A lot of new partnerships are being initiated, old ones are being rejuvenated. I know within UNEP, there's a big push to really work towards bringing gender and gender mainstreaming towards the center stage. And of course, we're leading up to ICCM 5 and hoping that a SAICM gender action plan will be on the cards. So I think this is a really well timed webinar, and I'm very happy to share some of the activities that BRS has been working on. Okay, well, I think, of course, I need to start out with the context and with respect to gender in the UN system. I know I'm talking to experts, so I think I'll just point out that, of course, we're looking back to 1992, Principle 20 of the Rio Declaration, recognizing, of course, the important role women play in environment and development, and then, of course, going through to the SDGs. The issues of gender and integrating gender considerations into the development and environment agendas has slowly been increasing over time. Within the BRS, the chemicals and waste MEAs, again, I think we have experts here today, but of course, when I refer to the chemicals and waste MEAs, I refer to the Basel Convention, which deals mainly with the hazardous and other wastes and their transboundary movement and environmentally sound management. The Stockholm Convention, specifically on persistent organic pollutants, and then lastly, the Rotterdam Convention, which looks at the trade in hazardous chemicals and pesticides. So within these three conventions, which were joined together in 2012 under a synergies process. The gender path is, as I mentioned at the start, probably about 12, 13 years long, starting with really acknowledgement within the secretariat of the importance of bringing the gender mainstreaming aspects into our work programs. That, of course, led to a number of steps, first of which was development of a gender action plan that looked not only within the secretariat, but our activities with partners, and also the programming, the technical assistance, capacity building work that we were doing, ensuring gender is integrated into those programs. So following the BRS Gender Action Plan, we then took the next step, which was going to the parties, to the 3 conventions. And this was in 2017. The first, we call it an omnibus decision, which is a decision, identical decision across the 3 conventions, was adopted on gender mainstreaming. And since then, we've really had a strong mandate to continue to work on gender and implement gender action plan. I should mention that it is updated at every COP cycle. So recently that's been every year, but I'm happy to say, reverting to a 2-year time frame again. Just a quick look at what's in the plan now, because there were quite a few developments. I won't go through every aspect there. I think what is interesting is that there are discussions around, looking beyond just the sort of binary gender issues, and looking at more inclusive activities, inclusive of all genders, under the third activity family there. We also have come out of just doing quite a bit of work with regard to country level case studies and so forth, and there's really provision to continue development of those types of activities too. Something that I really want to emphasize is the importance of continuing to build our data bank with respect to the disaggregated data sources. And basically, we, as the BRS Secretariat, had a sort of baseline study done in 2017, whereby we looked across all of the operations, looked across the meetings, all the different expert groups and so forth, looking at gender, the representation there, but also across, for example, development of national implementation plans under the Stockholm Convention, to look at how much the issues of gender and women's representation were included in those plans as submitted by parties. And we really set a baseline for where we were going back to 2017, and now we're, quickly heading towards 2024, we're looking to update that data. So I think we'll have some very interesting reflections coming up in the next year or so. Really, for the Gender Action Plan, you may have noticed that I've referred to Secretariat initiated activities, and something we also are really going to engage a lot with the parties over the next 2 years is to look more at party-led action. At the moment, the COP decisions under BRS really do encourage parties to mainstream gender. Of course, that looks different depending on your national setting, but we would like to see if there's a possibility of inclusion of party-led actions in a BRS Gender Action Plan, similar to what, for example, we see the Minamata Convention looking to do, and other MEAs. So watch this space in that regard. I am coming to the end, I promise. I just wanted to flag that in addition to the Gender Action Plan, we've had quite a number of activities, as I mentioned before, celebrating the women's leadership role in this important journey. And I really encourage you, if you have a moment, to visit our website. Quite proud of the Gender Heroes publication that we would like to have a second iteration of, subject to funding, of course. But that's got some really great stories across the globe of really women taking the leadership in chemicals and waste management across all sectors. We also had our Gender Pioneers Awards. This was a number of years ago. Again, we'd love to do something like that going forward. This recognized, it was mainly women's leadership, but no, there was also men in there too, which was very nice to see. There are the men really championing the gender agenda. There I go again. Just to end by saying, we also have recently produced, together with Women Engaged for a Common Future, a new set of case studies, these two focusing on Kenya and Tunisia. And they're fantastic. There's 6 other studies as well that look across other countries, but these are the 2 recent studies that I really encourage you to look into, really looking at you know, the impacts of chemicals and waste on the different genders, but also some really interesting case studies that can be taken forward. And I think there's some good examples there. There's also 2 documentary films, one on this previous set of case studies and another going back to case studies that were developed a few years back. So if you're looking for something to watch, I really encourage you to go to our website and take a look. I will leave it there, but just to end with some resources, and thank you again for inviting me to present, and I will hand it back to the organizers. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan, for sharing this presentation. Now, next we have Ms. Olga Speranskaya, who will talk about women leaders and the importance of fostering women leadership. Olga is the co-director of Health and Environment Justice Support and a senior advisor to IPEN. She has more than 20 years of experience working on chemicals, health, and justice to advance international and regional chemicals and waste policies. Olga was also an IPEN co-chair for 8 years, and in 2009, she received the Goldman Environmental Prize for her work to identify and eliminate the Soviet legacy of toxic chemicals in the environment. Olga is a co-chair of IPEN's Women's Caucus, and she conducts regular online and face-to-face meetings with IPEN women leaders to share knowledge and experience about minimizing and eliminating toxic chemicals exposure to women's and children's health. Over to you, Olga.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. So I don't have slides, I'm sorry to say. But I totally agree with Joelle and Jacqueline and Susan that women leadership is of utmost importance. And women leaders can bring unique viewpoints and approaches needed to solve various problems. And their participation in policy processes helps create a more diverse and inclusive society. So women leaders often prioritize issues such as health, gender equality, women's rights, and social justice. And they can advocate for policies that address the specific needs and challenges faced by women, leading to more equitable societies. So I think that women leadership is especially important for addressing issues related to toxic chemicals, particularly in sectors dominated by women, including textile and garment sector, and electronics, and beauty salons, and agriculture, or like informal sector. And it is known that these and many other workplaces expose women to hazardous substances, including endocrine disrupting chemicals and potentially dangerous working conditions. So often no information on their health hazards is provided, leaving women unaware of the potential health effects. For example, negative health consequences for women working in the textile and clothing sector inter alia include breast cancer and spontaneously aborted first pregnancy and hypertensive disorders during pregnancy. But women do not always associate their health problems with toxic chemical exposure, as they are not aware about what chemicals they are exposed to. So additionally, women may face health and safety risks due to difference in body size and reproductive health concerns and lack of personal protective equipment tailored to their needs. So to add to this, many workplaces can be demanding, requiring long working hours and field work, and balancing between responsibilities with family and caregiving can be particularly challenging for women, leading to so-called work-life conflicts. So when women hold leadership positions, they inspire and empower other women and girls and show them that it is possible to overcome barriers and challenges, including those related to chemical exposure, of course. So they promote policies that support work-life balance, such as flexible working hours, parental leave, childcare facilities. And they also promote a supportive and inclusive work environment that encourages a healthy work-life integration for all employees. So very unfortunately, women still continue to face gender disparities and discrimination in various spheres. So fostering women leadership helps challenge and break down these barriers. And when women have equal opportunities to rise to leadership positions, it promotes gender equality and sends a powerful message about the value of women's contributions and capabilities. So in addition, research has shown that organizations with diverse leadership teams, including women, tend to perform better. And diverse perspectives contribute to more innovative thinking and better decision-making based on the skills and expertise that women bring to the table. And I would like to highlight that women play a crucial role in the work of IPEN by addressing toxic exposure from chemicals and waste in different countries. And actually, IPEN women leaders are known around the world. And they work in communities affected by toxic chemicals in various economic sectors. And they fight gender inequality at workplaces and raise awareness and understanding among women from poor and marginalized communities about health risks associated with toxic chemicals exposure. So some women leaders from IPEN participating organizations specifically focus on endocrine disrupting chemicals, including pesticides, and their health effects on women and children in rural areas. And they work at the policy and community level, bringing their knowledge and expertise to the table to ensure better control over toxic chemicals. And they promote safe and non-chemical alternatives and ecosystem-based approach in agriculture. But IPEN women leaders also play a critical role in raising understanding of mercury health effects. For example, in artisanal and small-scale gold mining communities, where women and children suffer from mercury exposure, or in textile sector where hazardous chemicals are actually applied at nearly all stages of textile and clothing manufacturing. So women leaders from IPEN participating organizations educate families and local communities about toxic chemicals health threats. And they care for children suffering from exposure and generate data that justify the urgency of addressing health effects from toxic chemicals. As the other said, IPEN has Women's Caucus that foster partnerships among women professionals working in the chemicals and waste management and encourage knowledge sharing and collaboration, and also joint initiatives to advance gender equality and empower women. So we regularly set up meetings to share experience and concerns and challenges and brainstorm for new ideas and innovative approaches to minimize toxic exposure on women, children, and families and communities. So for example, our recent face-to-face meeting was held in Paris prior to the second session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee to develop a global legally binding instrument on plastic. So many IPEN women leaders work globally and nationally to address plastic pollution from waste and from hazardous additives and processing aid chemicals in plastics. So participating in the negotiations provides them with opportunities to share their knowledge with national governmental representatives and help promote important elements in the plastic treaty, including the need to address health issues associated with plastic chemical exposure. So many IPEN leaders call for transparency of chemical information in plastics throughout the entire plastic life cycle, including traceability of chemicals in plastic products, including those for women and children, actually prioritizing those for women and children. So there's a lot to do, and together we are very positive, and we look forward with belief and optimism, and yeah, that together we can make a real change and empower women. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Olga, for your time and your words. And now I think it is time to begin with the experience sharing session. And we have 3 speakers from the case study report that IPEN prepared. And the link to the report is going to be now shared in the chat box. So our first speaker for this next session on experience sharing is Kwon Yoon Eun. I hope I'm pronouncing it well, from SHARPS. And SHARPS is an NGO in South Korea titled Supporters for Health and Right of People in Semiconductor Industry. This NGO in South Korea works with the human rights of workers in the electronic industry, mainly focusing on the right to health since 2007. Kwon has been working as a community organizer for SHARPS since 2013, and she's also working on a book with SHARPS. And Kwon is also working on a book right now with SHARPS titled People Who Make Problems into Problems, which will publicize potential routes of chemical exposure that women face in the workplace. I think it's going to be a very interesting presentation. So over to you, Kwon.
Yeah. Good evening. In Korea, it's a very late time, so my church.
Thank you for being with us.
Okay, I'll read.
I'm very well accompanied.
Yeah. My name is Young-eun Kwon of SHARPS. Here's a short introduction to my interview from IPEN gender case study last year. The SHARPS, can I change? Oh, okay. The SHARPS activity made me realize the problem of industry accident and the importance of prevention. I became interested in local community and environmental pollution issues after I discovered the consequence of POSCO activity in my hometown. Pregnancy and childbirth during my shop's activities led me to become interested in the health issue of workers' children. Currently, I'm trying to focus on the issue of women workers in the semiconductor and electronic industry. Semiconductor factories are part of a dangerous industry that used of thousands of chemicals, but companies advertise it as a clean and safe industry, despite the known fact that women's bodies are more vulnerable to chemicals. It is hard for their voice to be heard and to make a difference. This is due to the still existing patriarchy in the Korean society and the lack of education on the risk in the semiconductor industry. Most of the female workers at Samsung who have reported occupational disease to shops are in their 20s and 30s. They have reported breast and ovarian cancer, irregular periods, miscarriage, infertility, and even health issues with their children. The media covered the issue of children's health damage under the headline, Semiconductor Children, which Samsung quickly denied as characterized as fictional. A civil society study based on data from the National Health Insurance Service found that female semiconductor and electronic workers had higher rates of miscarriage and infertility than women in the general workforce. After a decade of claims and demands by shops, the government confirmed that the instance and mortality rates of leukemia among female semiconductor workers was significantly higher. Unfortunately, this recognition of a women's health vulnerability happens after many of them became sick. The US already banned EGES as reproductive chemicals in the 90s. South Korea was much slower to understand reproductive toxicity. Only in 2014, following criticism, did Samsung announce that it was banning EGS in its factories. The issue of reproductive toxicity and damage to children's health from chemicals is still not well understood and addressed in the Korean society. Park pictures here told Bloomberg that she never received proper health and safety training. She suffered breast cancer and miscarriage and infertility. Despite the challenges, several female Samsung workers raised the issue of their children's health problems. Here are some examples. Kim Min-jun was born with one kidney missing. His remaining kidney is only 10% functional. He still needs to visit the hospital once a month because he's worried about his constant bloody kidney and declining kidney function. Park Soo-bin is also missing a kidney, born with a closed-off throat. He was on the operating table as soon as he was born. As an infant, his vision development in one eye was significantly delayed, and he received treatment to remedy it. Lee Jun-ho suffered from congenital megacolon, a condition in which the large bowel failed to develop and function properly. Victims who reported to damage to their children's health participate in press conference, interview, discussion, and meeting to advocate for change to the law. In December 2021, the law was amended to allow children to apply for workers' compensation. It's a long way from proving an industry accident to being recognized as a workers' compensation case. Even the opportunity to apply for workers' compensation is not well known. Only 5 people, including the 4 who reported to SHAPS, apply for a workers' compensation recognition. In 2022, SHAPS published a book on the issue of reproductive toxicity and the right to health of women workers and their children. It includes interviews with victims and the experience and concern of experts and activists. We want to look at the issue of reproductive toxicity and second-generation occupational disease from various perspectives, including gender perspective and structural perspective. The ebook will be released soon, and we looking forward to your interest. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kwon, for this presentation. Yes, the second speaker that we will have on this session on experiences sharing is Oruba Al-Refai. She comes from NGO Hands for Environment and Sustainable Development in Jordan. Oruba is a civil engineer and an environmental activist since 2016. She started her own NGO in 2019, and since then, she started her environmental work by raising awareness campaigns, building capacities, and negotiating at the national and international levels on chemicals and waste issues. I will hand over to you, Oruba, for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo, for the introduction. I am very humbled to be part of this report, first of all, with these amazing women. In my presentation, I will introduce my experience in conducting this report with the IPEN team and all the collaboration. My name is Oruba. I'm the founder of Hands for Environment and Sustainable Development. First of all, long story short, as I'm a life example of what was described by Mr. Jewel in the beginning. I was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 24 years old, which is a very young age. It's not normal. Usually women above 40 may have these issues, but women in their 20s, it's just not normal. So I got my treatment in Al Hussein Cancer Center in Amman, Jordan. And doctors basically detected my family tree for any genetic breast cancer for 7 generations. It was none. There is no case of breast cancer in my family for 7 generations. Also, I got tested for 20 different genes in my system for any sort of cancer. None of these 20 genes detected to be cancerous. So the center told me it may be provoked by something, which started my environmental interest, and I started to dig in with the causes that may cause breast cancer. Of course, breast cancer is an growing problem worldwide. Researchers find nearly 300 chemicals linked to breast cancer, contributing to hormones in every product, and call for a renewed focus on women's exposure risks. Scientific evidence supports the role of numerous lifestyle, genetic, psychological, and pharmaceutical risks factor, the breast cancer pathogenesis, and some positive association have also been found with environmental and occupational exposures. Indeed, employment in direct workplace sectors like farming, plastic production, metalworking, chemicals, and rubber manufacturing and healthcare has been reported to increase the risk of breast tumors. My roadmap, I tried to describe it briefly. I started to volunteering, unpaid volunteering experiences with different NGOs. Then I got that chance. I was lucky to participate in the Stockholm Convention. It was an eye-opening experience because I got to learn how things go on international levels and what international conventions mean, and that happened in a young age, which gave me enough experience to participate in my community. Then I established Hands for Environment and Sustainable Development. Our mission was raising awareness on POPs and toxins and finding solutions, and we got accredited by the UNEP, and we are also a participant organization with the IPEN team. By the way, IPEN has funded me to participate in the Stockholm Convention in 2017, which was a huge jump for me in this field. Some of the projects we worked on was the talcum powder in 2020. As we all know, that Johnson & Johnson in Canada and USA are facing or faced a huge scandal regarding the asbestos in talcum powder and all the lawsuits they are facing for ovarian cancer accusations. So we have held the first national conference in Jordan with experts, doctors, governance, different allies from different organizations also attended the conference, and we discussed the health impact on women of talcum powder and asbestos contamination. Also, we have worked on toxins in beauty products and makeup. We have a collaboration with the IPEN. We offered a free online course for women in the region, MENA region, Middle East and North Africa. We have discussed heavy metals in makeup and skin products. As you know, some of you know, that a single lipstick or a single makeup piece can have up to 9 different heavy metals. Asbestos, also parabens and phthalates and benzene can be in sun products as well. So you can imagine the amount of toxins a woman is subjected to every single time she's using a makeup. Also, we have conducted researches and study by collecting children recycled plastic children toys and food packaging, and we sent it to Arnica for examination, and we also shared the results with the government, and we held a press release in the purpose of the public health interest. Finally, we worked on reporting, negotiating, and enhancing legislation through participating in SAICM meetings, Stockholm, Rotterdam, and Basel conventions, and other national and local environmental conventions. We prepared a national report on plastic circular economy lately, communicated with related ministries and governmental officials, participating in international forums and policy papers. We have been working on policy papers, and until now we have prepared or done with 3 policy papers, and it was shared through the media and with the governments. Why women? We focused in our work on women for several reasons. I think all lives matters. Males and females are important equally, but there's reasons why we focused on women. First of all, women face a greater risk from chemical exposure and experiences higher rates of adverse health outcomes. As my previous colleagues mentioned, that women usually, it's not stereotyping, it's the it's facts and numbers. Women more likely do participate in household chores, which means interaction with chemicals and cleaning products more than men, which subject them to endocrine disrupting chemicals and forever chemicals. And also women tend to use makeup, skin products, and all other beauty products more than men, which also project them to more threats, health threats. Women pass toxin to fetuses through the umbilical cord and to infants through breast milk, which means that we are talking about the next generations. It's not just about a single or individual person. Of course, it's important, but also it's passing it to the next generation, and that's very important and crucial for building a healthier future. As one of the studies that IPEN shares in 2017, newborn was an average newborn would have up to 200 chemicals in their system, which is very sad. Women's health always gets sort of short shrift because, for example, breast cancer causing chemicals are not taken into consideration in regulation process in agencies. Lower chances for digital education. It was shared by several UN Women reports that women have less access, by 25% less access to internet than men, which can limit their educational and learning process. The limitation of women in the decision-making and leadership process. Also, it was mentioned in several UN reports that women working on farming, for example, on farming laborers, have the percentage is from 43 to 70% are women, but the percentage of owning these farms or lands are less than men. It's only 15%, which means that women do not have a saying when it comes to pesticides they are using or the process of farming they are conducting. Also, finally, women's cares, because women do care about their children's health and family health. The challenges and strategies as a female environmental activist and an NGO we are facing is the misconception. People think the governments control and test all the products and waste. Regulation of toxin and chemicals takes a long process. We all know that it's not just a click. It takes years to regulate and ban chemicals and another decades for exemptions and regulation process. Change the wrong mentality and habits of people. Some women do tend to put their risks in health and risk because of the beauty standards that the social media and the media and television puts on women more than men. So even if she knows that it's harmful, she is willing to put herself in risk in return for to be up to the standards. Overtaking the economic situation over the environmental situation. For example, in Jordan, it's always the economical and political status is more important than environmental one. It can be understandable for a certain level, but it is an obstacle for our environmental goals. Male domination, of course, lack of transparency in obtaining information from both sides, the governmental and the private sectors. It's not always an easy task to get information, numbers, and surveys. Our strategies, I try to make it really brief. Positive thinking, for example, I focused on being a female to communicate and be in female very conservative communities. For example, in Jordan, we still have a very conservative communities. It's not an easy task for a man to talk with women about their warm health and not to use talcum powder between your legs. That's not possible in Jordan. So as a female, I can't talk freely with other women about these subjects. Also, alliances with experts in the field, because you can't negotiate the numbers and scientific studies and facts. Collaborating with external organizations, non-profit and educational institutions, because that can give you accreditation for a certain level. Youth engagement and capacity building, public outreach and awareness, and raising awareness. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening. I can't hear you, Eduardo.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you very much, Aruba, for your presentation and especially for your experience, which is a first-hand experience. I think it's very important for us to hear what you have to say today. And now please join me in welcoming our last speaker of the day, Diane Maimuna Ndeye. She's the regional coordinator for Pesticide Action Network, Pan Africa, and she is based in Senegal. Diane holds a dual master's degree in geography with a focus on ecosystems and environment and sustainable development engineering, specialized in health sciences. Diane carries extensive knowledge on the intersection of environmental, social, and health aspects of chemical use. And she has also a strong background in women's empowerment and gender issues in relation to chemical exposure. Her work primarily revolves around preventative strategies for health risks and advocating for safe and sustainable futures. We look forward to hearing from you, Maimuna. Please, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Eduardo. Merci de m'avoir passé la parole. Je pense que ce soir, on a été séduits par les expériences des femmes leaders. Je pense que nous aussi, en tant que coordonnatrice de Pan Africa, je vais partager mon expérience en tant que femme en matière de gestion des produits chimiques, mais également sur les questions de leadership féminin. Voilà, bon, ce soir, ce qu'on va essayer d'aborder. Bon, juste, je pense que comme l'a mentionné mes autres collègues femmes leaders, je pense que l'année dernière, ou bien il y a 2 ans de cela, on avait travaillé avec IPEN sur une bouclette. Je vais quand même partager l'expérience des femmes leaders. Je pense qu'on avait partagé notre expérience. J'aimerais vraiment vous poser une question, ou bien partager avec vous ce qui m'a le plus poussé à travailler sur la question des Juste dire que c'est un intérêt particulier. Pourquoi c'est un intérêt particulier? Quand j'étais toute petite, si je me rappelle, mon défunt papa travaillait dans le domaine de l'agriculture. Et spécialement, il était dans le gouvernement, il travaillait dans une structure qui était chargée de la protection des cultures au niveau d'une communauté qui était basée à l'ouest du Sénégal. Donc, j'avais l'habitude dès le bas âge, souvent à l'accompagner durant les dimanches pour ces missions de suivi sur le terrain. Et juste rappeler qu'à cette époque, eux aussi, ils utilisaient beaucoup de pesticides pour le traitement des cultures.
Sorry to interrupt, Diane. I think our interpreters are having some issues on the sound. I don't know if you can please either approach to the microphone or check your settings or speak a little bit louder. That might help for the interpretation.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry. Did you hear me now? It's okay.
Yes,
You are you.
It's still low. If you can speak a little bit louder, please.
Yeah. Bon, comme je l'ai dit, hein, c'est vraiment un intérêt particulier que j'ai eu à hériter de mon papa à l'époque, qui travaille sur la question des pesticides, plus précisément dans le domaine de l'agriculture. Et à l'époque aussi, il y avait une usine de production de pesticides qui était juste installée à côté de notre maison. Et je me rappelle que cette usine de production, quand même, a beaucoup pollué la zone environnante, la pollution en termes de sol, la pollution également atmosphérique. Et je me rappelle qu'à l'époque, il y avait vraiment un tollé médiatique pour dénoncer quand même la pollution de cette usine. Donc, au vu de tout cet environnement où j'ai grandi, je me suis intéressée plus tard à travers mes études, mais aussi à travers ma carrière professionnelle, à la question des produits chimiques. Juste pour revenir sur l'exposition des femmes aux produits chimiques, particulièrement au Sénégal. En général, au Sénégal, les femmes sont exposées dans l'agriculture à travers l'utilisation des pesticides. Et je pense qu'il y avait quelqu'un qui avait mentionné que les femmes sont non seulement exposées en utilisant les pesticides, mais en lavant les habits des hommes qui étaient de retour après les champs, disons après les cultures. Et moi-même, j'ai eu à rencontrer sur le terrain des femmes qui pulvérisaient elles-mêmes leur parcelle de terrain. Il y avait le bébé sur le dos, donc elles sont exposées de cette manière. Il y a aussi les femmes qui travaillent dans la récupération dans les décharges et récupèrent les déchets qui sont là-bas pour le recyclage. Il y en a qui travaillent aussi dans les usines de recyclage du plomb, ici à Dakar. Je pense que j'ai été sur le site. Il y en a aussi qui sont exposés sur les sites d'orpaillage. Parce qu'une fois, j'étais à Kédougou, c'est un site d'orpaillage au niveau du Sénégal, situé à l'ouest du Sénégal. J'ai rencontré des femmes même qui font le traitement avec le mercure et le cyanure. Donc, ces femmes sont exposées à ces produits chimiques. En parlant d'exposition, comme certains l'ont tout à l'heure dit, les femmes et les hommes sont affectés différemment en termes d'exposition. Parce que les femmes subissent plus les effets des perturbateurs endocriniens et il y a pas mal de fausses couches qu'on a eu à déceler au niveau surtout du sud-est, c'est-à-dire dans les sites d'orpaillage. Il y a des interruptions de grossesse, des malformations qui ont eu à être quand même décelées au niveau des sites d'orpaillage, mais aussi au niveau des sites d'agriculture, parce que les femmes, quand on les interviewe, elles nous racontent quand même des fausses couches qu'elles ont eu à connaître, quand même des malformations, des bébés qui ont eu des malformations à la naissance. Donc, qu'est-ce que PAN a essayé de faire à travers moi-même, parce que comme je suis la coordonnatrice, et j'avoue que je travaille depuis presque 10 ans sur la question des femmes, du leadership féminin, etc. Je pense que nous, on a essayé quand même de renforcer les capacités techniques des femmes. Et on l'a fait dans la région de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. On a essayé de former ces femmes en termes de leadership, parce que quand on parle de produits chimiques et de femmes, il faut que ces femmes soient outillées, que ces femmes aient les capacités. Mais on ne peut pas prendre toutes les femmes qui sont dans les organisations et les prendre comme des femmes leaders. Non, il faut qu'elles aient d'abord les capacités techniques pour être des femmes leaders et avoir les capacités pour travailler sur les questions des produits chimiques et des déchets. Parce que vraiment, c'est des notions techniques. Il faut qu'on s'accorde sur ça. Donc, nous, on a essayé de former ces femmes à travers un financement qu'on avait reçu du ministère des Affaires étrangères des Pays-Bas, ce qu'on appelait le Funding Leadership and Opportunities for Women. Donc, on a essayé de former des femmes de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Et là, vous pouvez reconnaître le docteur Adektana qui était venu à Dakar avec d'autres femmes du Mali pour participer à cette formation. En termes d'égalité des sexes et de leadership des femmes dans la gestion des produits chimiques, surtout dans le domaine des pesticides, On a essayé de former des femmes au niveau national qui s'activent dans l'agriculture, surtout dans le sens de les outiller pour avoir vraiment les capacités de gérer ces produits chimiques et les déchets qui s'en découlent. Là, c'est un ensemble d'activités qu'on a eu à réaliser au niveau national. Toujours dans le sens vraiment de travail avec les femmes sur la question des produits chimiques, on a développé avec nos partenaires de Pan-Asie-Pacifique une campagne qu'on appelle les 16 Days of Global Action. Et durant ces jours d'action globale, moi, j'essaie quand même de travailler surtout avec les femmes. On fait des activités de communication, par exemple des émissions radio, des conférences de presse, des forums de discussion pour parler des questions de femmes, de produits chimiques et de genre. Comment impliquer ces femmes pour qu'elles savent le rôle qu'elles doivent jouer en termes de gestion des produits chimiques et des déchets. On a également pu bénéficier à travers le FEM d'un projet sur la gestion des pots au Sénégal. Ce n'était pas seulement au Sénégal, c'était un projet sous-régional. Il y avait le Sénégal, le Togo, le Bénin et le Burkina Faso. Et je me rappelle qu'au Sénégal, j'avais sélectionné un réseau de femmes qui devait mettre en œuvre le projet au niveau national. Ce réseau de femmes a été formé, parce qu'on avait formé d'abord des formatrices, parce que ce projet, ce sont des femmes au niveau des communautés qui l'ont mis en place au niveau national. Ces femmes ont été formées sur des questions techniques telles que les POP. Et après, elles ont été chargées de vraiment dérouler les activités au niveau national à travers la formation de leurs autres partenaires femmes, à travers des activités de sensibilisation. Il y avait la production d'un film documentaire sur la gestion écologiquement rationnelle des POP. Donc, c'est un ensemble d'activités que ce réseau de femmes a déroulé au niveau national. Là, c'est des activités que j'ai eu à participer au niveau international. Juste rappeler qu'entre 2014 et 2015, quand même, j'ai participé à l'élaboration de ce qu'on appelle le rapport alternatif sur la Convention sur l'élimination de toutes les formes de discrimination à l'égard des femmes, ce qu'on appelle le SIDA. Donc, au niveau du Sénégal, j'ai été sélectionnée pour participer à l'élaboration de ce rapport alternatif. Et je pense que l'axe principal prioritaire pour nous, PAN, a été les femmes et les produits chimiques. Et je me rappelle que j'avais participé à la 13e session de la Convention. J'avais même fait une déclaration pour vraiment aborder ces questions de genre et de produits chimiques. Mais l'ensemble de ces activités qu'on a essayé de mettre en œuvre depuis près de 10 ans, on rencontre pas mal de défis en tant que femme dans le secteur. Parce que ce qu'il faut noter, c'est que surtout en Afrique, on a des préjugés socioculturels et religieux qui vraiment constituent un blocus pour l'épanouissement, l'autonomisation même des femmes qui travaillent sur ces questions de produits chimiques et de déchets. Parce qu'il y a de ces milieux vraiment, c'est pas facile pour les femmes. Le rôle des femmes ou bien le travail que font les femmes dans certains secteurs est mal vu par les hommes. Donc, il y a des stéréotypes qui sont là déjà, qui constituent un véritable obstacle à la réalisation d'une véritable égalité entre hommes et femmes. Ce qu'on déplore aussi, c'est l'absence de formation et d'équipement de protection industrielle. Je pense qu'il y avait Olga, je ne sais pas qui l'a mentionné. Beaucoup de femmes travaillent dans le secteur des produits chimiques et des déchets, mais elles ne sont pas équipées, elles ne sont pas protégées. Il n'y a pas de formation sur comment travailler sur ces produits chimiques, comment se protéger. Donc, je pense vraiment qu'il y a un manque de formation. Mais il y a aussi un manque de données qu'on doit vraiment dénoncer sur les produits chimiques dangereux et leur impact sur les femmes. Il n'y a pas vraiment de données vraiment fiables jusqu'à présent sur le link entre produits chimiques et impact sur les femmes. L'autre chose aussi à considérer comme un défi, c'est la faible participation des femmes à la prise de décision. Ça, c'est à tous les niveaux et dans tous les secteurs. Parce que les femmes sont faiblement représentées et elles ne participent pas souvent à la prise de décision. Les décisions sont prises, après, on nous appelle pour mettre en œuvre ces décisions. Donc, il faut qu'on se batte pour être dans les instances de prise de décision. Moi, j'ai eu à quand même essayer de formuler certaines recommandations. Ces recommandations vont dans le sens vraiment de renforcer notre travail. Et je pense qu'il faut qu'on arrive à développer une approche pour intégrer le genre et les produits chimiques dans les plans nationaux de développement. Parce que ça, c'est vraiment un point intéressant. Parce que si vous voyez les plans nationaux de mise en œuvre de la Convention de Stockholm, Bâle, Rotterdam, et même le truc là, comment on appelle ça, le NIP sur le mercure, les questions de genre et de leadership féminin ne sont pas clairement prises en compte dans ces plans nationaux. Et je pense qu'on a besoin qu'on intègre ces éléments pour qu'on puisse vraiment faciliter le leadership, mais aussi le travail sur les questions de production. Comme je l'ai eu tout à l'heure à le dire, il y a la collecte de données ventilées par sexe aussi qui pose problème. On n'a pas assez d'informations, de données fiables sur ces éléments. Mais aussi, il est pertinent aussi de renforcer les droits des femmes. Il faut renforcer les droits des femmes. Je pense qu'on doit aller dans ce sens. Surtout, renforcer le droit à la participation dans tous les aspects de la prise de décision. Il faut que les femmes soient présentes. Il faut qu'on soit présente dans les instances de prise de décision, qu'on participe également dans les processus de négociation pour les accords liés à l'environnement, que ce soit BRS, que ce soit le INC, que ce soit sur le mercure. Il faut faciliter vraiment la participation des femmes. Parce qu'en général, comment dire, lors de ces conférences, si tu vois le nombre d'hommes qui participent et le nombre de femmes, il y a vraiment un gap qui est là. Il faut qu'on arrive à trouver une solution pour faciliter la participation de ces femmes à ces négociations, à ces accords multilatéraux. Il faut que les femmes soient présentes parce que si on n'est pas présente, les autres vont prendre des décisions à notre place. Il faut que, je ne sais pas si c'est IPEN, si c'est l'UNEP, si c'est SAICM, il faut qu'on soit vraiment présente dans ces conférences internationales qui parlent sur les produits chimiques. L'autre chose, c'est de renforcer les liens spécifiques entre la santé et les produits chimiques. Ça, il faut un travail approfondi pour aller dans ce sens. Et le dernier point, non moins négligeable, est d'attribuer et fournir des financements à ces femmes leaders qui travaillent sur la question des produits chimiques et du genre. Parce que si on n'a pas de fonds, si on n'a pas de financement, si on n'arrive pas à mettre des projets au niveau national, je pense qu'on va se réunir chaque année, faire des webinaires, faire des ateliers pour les questions de femmes et de genre, mais qu'on n'aura pas à atteindre nos objectifs. Il faut qu'on ait des projets à développer au niveau national et aussi qu'on ait le soutien des partenaires comme le FEM, comme la SAICM, comme l'UNEP, comme le secretariat BRS. Il faut qu'on implémente des projets au niveau national, vraiment pour faciliter et pour atteindre nos objectifs. Merci pour votre attention.
Many thanks to you, Diane, for also sharing with us your experience. I think we've come already to close to the time for finalizing this webinar, but I would like to still encourage you to use the question and answer box if you have any questions. So far, we have one question that I would like to raise for one of our panelists, our colleague Susan Winfeld from BRS, and it's a question that was posted on the chat box in French, but I'll try to translate it for you. It's from Ghislaine Chokuatu. She's the president of Women's Action for a Bioplanet Cameroon, and she wants to have your views, Susan, on this particular question. She says that in recent years, we've seen that more and more women are interested and are becoming part of chemical pollution discussions and issues, particularly in developing countries. And she says that SAICM, through NGOs or NGO networks, visibly encourages this initiative, although it's not yet sufficient. She says that we all know the major role that the BRS plays in good chemical management, but she feels that the BRS conventions do not support directly women's groups. NGOs led by women and other women's organizations to carry out these types of projects in countries from the South. So she's specifically asking if there is a possibility for seeing project calls launched by the BRS for female leaders in the South.
Well, thank you very much, Ghislaine, for that very interesting question. There's a few things there that I'd just like to comment on. First of all, in terms of participation by female leaders in, for example, our negotiating processes, you know, the governing body, the COPs, subsidiary bodies and expert groups and so forth. We do open up to observers. It's a very open forum for observer participation, NGOs, so forth, grassroots enterprises, etc. The only thing that we need to ensure is that there is that level of expertise of the entity participating. Having said that, and I think maybe you're leaning towards, well, is there resources to assist the participation? At this point, we don't support NGO or observer participation in our meetings, but I think this is something that is being discussed more, how to bring a wider breadth of stakeholders to the conventions and for discussions. So hopefully watch this space. In terms of actual activities within countries, we're just initiating our gender action plan discussions now. Resourcing is something that we are having an issue with ourselves in terms of funding the activities within the plan. But one area of activity is looking at potentially having sort of pilot projects, some sort of project sponsored in countries, and that is already in the gender action plan. And we would look to, of course, subject to resourcing, to really engage sort of outside our normal observer base to more grassroots organizations. So I think there are some developments that we're working towards. I can't say anything concrete at the moment, but I'd say give us 6 months and I think you'll see a lot more in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan, for answering this question, and for Ghislaine as well for taking the initiative to ask here on the chat. So we're already 5 minutes past the time we were scheduled for this webinar. Just to say it also, there's a question on the chat box asking Oruba to share the link of the source report that she mentioned in the presentation, but all presentations will be shared with all participants in due course. So I don't want to take more time than what was scheduled in the webinar, so I would proceed now to give a close to this interesting meeting. I'm very grateful for our remarkable panelists that we had today, both in the beginning with the opening remarks and setting the stage presentations, but also with these 3 speakers sharing their experiences on the ground and firsthand. These have been very interesting presentations and engaging conversations, and your expertise and commitment to this cause have brought depth and diverse perspective to our dialogue today. So thank you very much, really. And of course, a hearty salute to all the participants as well. Your engagement in the discussions has been crucial to our conversation, and I think they've contributed to understand as well this crucial topic. Rest assured that the insights we've gleaned today won't be lost. In the weeks to follow, IPEN will be disseminating a summary of our webinar, along with the slides that our presenters have kindly shared today. This will be a resource at your fingertips that will allow you to revisit and reflect upon the powerful insights we've gathered today in your own time and at your own pace. Once again, my heartfelt thanks go to each of you for investing your time and energy in this event today. and we're eager to continue these important conversations with you. But until then, take care, keep up the good work, and continue to break barriers. Thank you very much. Thank you to the organizers, and thank you very much to panelists and participants. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done. Well done.